Hey everybody, I'm Eboni K. Williams along with Eric Bolling and Kat Timpf, and we are the Fox News Specialists. Anti-terror raids sweeping London today in the wake of Saturday's attack that killed 7 and injured dozens. UK authorities are now identifying 2 of the 3 terrorists in that attack that ISIS is claiming responsibility for. Fox News correspondent Mike Tobin joins us from London with more.
And, Ebony, the first of those terrorists identified as Rashid Redouane. He is a bit of a mystery. They assume he's 30 years old, but investigators, at least with the information they have made public, cannot pin down his country of origin. It's a different case for 27-year-old Karam Butt. He was well known to police as well as MI5, the investigative agency of the intelligence agency, since at least 2015. Primarily, he got on the radar for talking a great deal about radical Islamist ideology. You mentioned anti-terror raids. They have been happening at a flurry since the weekend. A couple of boroughs just outside of London. We know in one they picked up some 12 people, released one, so at least 11 are being held. Investigators do believe that they killed all the attackers, but believe there may be a wider network of people who assisted or sympathized with the attackers. Meantime, as London mourns, thousands have gathered in an area known as Potter's Field, very near the London Bridge, for a vigil. An angry London mayor, Sadiq Khan, himself a Muslim, said the attackers use a perverse ideology that is against the faith of Islam. And the commander of Scotland Yard is appealing to the public, particularly the Muslim community, for more information on what led up to the attacks. Back to you in New York.
Hey, Mike, tell me before we let you go, they named 2 of these attackers. They have identified all 3. What are they waiting to name the 3rd for?
It has to do with him being international. They're trying to pin down exactly where he's from, at least according to investigators, the particulars about him before they release that information, Eric.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mike. So with that, let's meet today's specialist. His career spans 15 years as a covert field operations officer for the CIA. He's also the co-founder of Diligence, LLC, a global intelligence security firm. He's a Fox News Channel regular, and he specializes in global crisis and U.S. national security. Oh, look at that. Mike Baker is here today. He is a best-selling author, a former member of Israel's top counter-terror unit. He's also the founder of Cherries, a leading manufacturer of specialized law enforcement products for terrorism readiness. But he specializes in, get this, late 80s hair metal drumming. But just don't ask him to successfully grow out his hair. Aaron Cohen is here. I had to read that one a couple times, Aaron. I was like, heavy metal? No, hair metal. But going to Terry, because this is certainly serious. I want to start with you on this, Mike. I want to read a couple things that stood out to me.
Sure.
Number one, 2 of these 3 attackers were already known to authorities, we're being told. One of them, it's being reported that a friend actually called one of these hotlines and reported him because he was obsessed with these hate-preaching YouTube videos or what have you. And also, police were warned that at least one of them was actively radicalizing children in local parks, giving them treats and candy and things like this. So the theme here, much like we saw in Manchester and in Orlando and in San Bernardino, at least some, if not all of these terrorists already on law enforcement's radar, yet something falling through the cracks. Help me out, Mike. How does this keep happening?
Yeah, well, and this is why the public, sometimes loses their mind. And the first top-line story you always hear is it's an intel failure or a law enforcement failure. Yeah. The reality is that, yes, I mean, some of those things that you said, those things happened. The individuals had become on the radar screen. The candies and sweets thing, radicalizing children, that's, that's a Ramadan thing. I'm going to hand out candy and money. But, at the end of the day, law enforcement in the intel community, whether we're talking about the UK or we're talking about the US, can only operate within the parameters of the laws that are established.
That's what I want you to
That is it.
Yeah.
And
so are their hands tied? Is that your perception?
Well, yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, their hands are tied if what you want them to do is be more aggressive. So when people say, look, the individual is on your radar screen, why weren't you following him 24/7 for the next several months? It's because you can't unless you've got sufficient evidence. And just because he was out at a park and he waved an ISIS flag, believe it or not, that's not sufficient
They
evidence.
documented him on a documentary. He was the jihadist next door, and he went on some terror watch list, and then he fell to the low end of the terror watch list. They let him go. Mike, I'm going to push back on you a little bit.
Sure.
A few years ago, I was on a show, and 5 or 6 years ago, on the 5. And a guest comes on, it was a terror attack, and the guest talks about Muslim no-go zones in Europe. He got in a whole crapload of trouble for saying it, to suggest that there was no-go zones. And now we're finding out, in fact, there are Muslim radical Islamic Muslim no-go zones where cops, local cops in France and in Great Britain don't go into these neighborhoods, and they let them actually practice Sharia law. Part of this is PC culture gone amok in Europe.
Absolutely. No, I don't disagree with that at all. Absolutely. And the political correctness.
Follow the, these law enforcement officers.
No, what I'm saying is the political correctness has created an environment where the laws exist, and you've got to play within those parameters. I mean, I guarantee you, if we were following somebody and the investigation didn't meet a sufficient protocol, then all of a sudden you've got everybody opening up their yap and complaining about privacy issues and everything. And now, of course, after an event, yes, everybody's on board with security, and the pendulum swings over towards security. Everybody wants security, but that doesn't happen for very long before it moves back and people start complaining. But I'm saying if you want it, then you got to change the laws and allow the investigators and allow intel and law enforcement to be more aggressive. That's a political issue.
Let me get Aaron in here because he also has a deep background in this stuff. I think a lot of people would feel in agreement with what Mike is saying right now. But of course, the other concern is this, protections and civil liberties and privacies, because ultimately, maybe we're talking about changing the probable cause standard. What's needed to move forward with an arrest when someone is suspected of this type of activity?
If I was leading this operation, I would want it to rain warrants, terrorist warrants, so I can kick down every door of every possible terrorist, friend of a terrorist, family member of a terrorist in Israel. If you cohorted with a terrorist or you had any knowledge of the terrorist attack, we're going to destroy your house. The reason why is because you don't deserve to even live here. If you had any knowledge of a potential terror attack.
So it's a different standard in Israel.
Well, it's about tone and what we're missing here. And he said the key word. And here, me and the CIA guy here, we are trying to download each other's cell phones the whole time.
Now we're working on Eric's.
Yeah, now we're working on Eric's. But here's the thing. He nailed it. It's about the law. But here's the thing. The law is a living, breathing thing. And I'm not a lawyer, but I will say this. Tone. It's no different in any other business. What is the tone that you want to set for the operation?
You want the tone? You want the tone, Aaron? Here's the tone. After the Manchester bombing, after the Ariana Grande concert, the mayor, Andy Burnham, came out and said, business as usual here, folks. What happens? A couple of days later, the London mayor gets there's a terror attack. Hang on. They mow down some people on the street. Exactly what ISIS plans and tells people to do, their fighters to go ahead and do. And what does the London mayor, Sadiq Khan, say? Remain calm, everybody.
He did. He said remain calm.
There's a tone that you don't want to be importing to this country.
Real quick, Aaron, full context though, Eric. He said remain calm because don't overreact to the increased police presence.
He was talking specifically about the police presence. That's what he said. Londoners will see an increased police presence today. Over the course of a few days, no reason to be alarmed.
I'm coming right to you, Kat, but first, this is actually a perfect setup, Eric, about this tone issue, because Prime Minister Theresa May perhaps changing tone, coming around stating what we all know about the Islamic terror threat.
While we have made significant progress in recent years, there is, to be frank, far too much tolerance of extremism in our country. So we need to become far more robust in identifying it and stamping it out across the public sector and across society. That will require some difficult and often embarrassing conversations.
Kat, about people that feel like it's too little, too late to just talk, where are you on that, and do you think this is at least even a step in the right direction?
I think that it certainly is. When you talk about somebody who we've been discussing, is on video with an ISIS flag, who's saying, I would murder my mother for ISIS, who's made it very clear that this is a radical person, how much more obvious or probable cause did you need to look deeper into a dude like that? I'm all about tolerance, but when somebody wants to murder me, I'm kind of not tolerant anymore. And he wasn't hiding. He wasn't like, oh, he kind of has watched some sort of questionable movie.
I'll just say, everybody is a counterterrorism specialist after an attack.
And you are.
Right?
And you're a counterterrorist. What does she mean by saying that we need to be more robust in IDing them and stamping them out?
Even though we know who they are.
Mike, come on.
Right. Okay, what's
this guy was almost taunting the fact that he was radical.
How do you not step up and say, no, we're going to knock down doors in these no-go zones, and we're going to pull people out, and we're going to look into the mosques.
And that's exactly right. We should be doing this. We should be aggressive. We should. But what I'm saying is, now she said that. Now, you know what they got to do? They got to bang that issue out in Parliament. They got to come up and say, we're going to have to revise some laws so that we can adjust the surveillance protocols, so that we can get on there and monitor and do the things that we need to be doing, so that we can open investigations and maintain them.
This whole thing is intel. Yeah. The Americans and the Brits are experts at investigating crime. Terrorism happens before. You don't have time to investigate. Everybody's dead. The responders show up. Everybody praising the responders. I love praising the responders. I'm trained law enforcement and SWAT for 20 years. They're going to get there in 8 minutes. They did a great job.
Yeah.
Problem is that profiling afterwards, fingerprinting, investigating, I don't even care if these guys were connected to a larger terror network, and let me tell you why. The profile of a would-be with no connection to ISIS with a knife on a bridge or in a car, it's going to do the same amount of damage as somebody sophisticatedly connected to ISIS.
Does it bother you, Aaron, that within minutes of this terror attack, forget after they're dead, within minutes, they've got 12 people arrested? What does that tell you?
It tells me that
They knew.
That's exactly what we know. You're right, Eric,
Yeah.
and that's my frustration as well on all of these attacks. It's not limited to this one. It was Manchester, it's Orlando, it's San Bernardino. So I think Mike is really driving this point home. It's a change in law that needs to happen, because we do know, before we go busting down all the mosques, Eric, they know who they are. They know who they are.
I'll ask you.
Criminally profiling, I am a staunch advocate of it.
Yeah.
Racial
That is-
profiling, no. But
Eric-
criminal profiling, absolutely.
No, Eric, you just said that is the key here. And people always, and Aaron and I were talking about this earlier, people always talk to me and say, well, how do we get to a tighter situation like in Israel? Israel, they've got it right. And I say, well, that's great. They're profiling constantly. That's what they do. You go to the airport, and what are they doing? They're looking, and it's very scientific.
It's a criminal
and
profile.
And we have to be able to do
Civil liberties are also very important in this country. We have to be.
Oh, sure they
we
are.
have to be absolutely protected.
But criminally profiling someone doesn't destroy their.
I'm not
civil
saying that, but I'm
liberties,
saying
right?
I'm talking about busting into mosques. I'm
Right,
down
well,
with
that's what I was saying. You don't, because you don't even need to do that. Sometimes we already know who they are, Eric. So it's not an issue of trying to find out who they are.
You're preaching to the choir. I'm telling you, I am in favor of aggressive profiling of anyone who's been somewhat even a friend of a friend is related to a terror cell. Bust their butt too. Find out what they're all about. Go ahead and get in there, because this is a whole new world. We're having a terror attack every few days now.
Every few days.
You want to import that stuff here because they'll hide
weeks.
behind the Constitution. Come on, I'm a constitutionalist too, but you know what? At a certain point in time when America's safety and national security is at risk, you gotta go one step further and say we're going to profile
So
these
when we say enough is enough, I think that's what that means. I think it's time to look at the statutes, revisit them, and recalibrate the standards that we have generally used to say this is how long you can be under surveillance. This is how long we need to have probable cause. Maybe we need to lower some of those standards.
Eric,
honestly.
you mentioned this in terms of terrorism, right? Which is what happened with the Patriot Act. This was supposed to be to protect us from terrorism. But as we all know, now it's being used for cases that have nothing to do with terrorism. So that's why you have to be very, very careful with civil liberties.
On mosques in cities that have are terror targets, this city for one. Should law enforcement or FBI, Intel Department,
we're talking about,
be able to listen into mosques?
You were talking about changing laws, the standard for proof, the standard for probable cause.
Actually,
For the sake of terrorism, for the sake of terrorism.
Yes.
But when you do something for the sake of terrorism in this country, often it gets expanded. Often they start to use it for other cases. And we don't want to let ISIS win, in a sense, by destroying our way of life for ourselves.
I disagree with that, Kat. I think when you talk about the reasons why a standard of law could ever be changed, there is no greater reason than public safety.
But it also is used to apply to other things, like drug cases, which have nothing to do with public safety.
Well,
It's
nobody's
happened in the
saying
past.
that. I'm saying it in this case. Go
If I can just inject a really cynical and negative point here, which is that I'm listening to this conversation, and you're right. I think what you're saying about profiling, what you're saying about adjusting and looking at the laws. I will say also I've been in these same conversations for what seems like a lifetime now.
Yeah.
I've been doing this a long time.
So why does it never go anywhere?
Because we have liberal mayors, we have liberal leaders who say,
Eric,
no, Eboni, come on, you
I wanted to ask Mike, because he actually was in the room.
Would you be in favor of listening into the mosques in New York City?
Not indiscriminately, but if you can connect dots to me, if you can connect dots to me.
Listen,
But not indiscriminately, unless we're going to do that for churches as well.
In Israel, Arabs blow themselves up.
Absolutely.
That's a fact.
Sure.
They're Muslims. Now, we also have 1 million Muslims who live in Israel who are Israeli citizens who don't want to be blown up, don't want to blow themselves up, are good people.
That's exactly
They serve in our
right.
military. Bedouins serve in our military. Druze do. And we have to listen. The reason why we have to listen is because you don't, or if you don't, ultimately in the end, you're going to fail. You have to follow that profile.
I am not saying not to listen, right? I am simply saying, and this is an important clarification, guys and ladies. Criminal profiling, absolutely.
Well,
because
so explain that.
Explain that versus racial or religious profiling.
Your criminal profile only will occur after the fact the crime has been committed.
I'm saying, Aaron, you're not listening to me. I am simply saying criminally profile on the front end. I'm not saying not to do that. I am distinguishing criminal profiles from religious profiles.
Please, I'm just trying to learn.
Okay.
Explain what you mean in a terror scenario. How do you on the front end of a terrorist act, how do you criminally profile a
You
terrorist?
look for things in their totality. So yes, religion, yes, race, but also their behavior, who they know. Like you said, their friends. Who are their friends? Who are they talking to?
And then
who are
what?
they communicating
Then
with?
you listen
and then you listen in. And then you bust them open.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what we do.
The key is you can make this happen. It's not a super heavy lift. You can make this happen, but I guarantee you the problem is we've got ADD, short-term memory here, and it doesn't take very long after an attack before we all go back to our lives.
Well, God, I hope we don't do that. President Trump going on all kinds of defense as his travel ban in the wake of the London attack. But will he win over the Supreme Court? It's going to get hot. Stay with us.
President Trump doubling down on his calls for the Supreme Court to reinstate his travel ban after the London terror attack. The president firing off a series of tweets earlier today and rebutting those on the left who still seem blind to the threat.
There's really no evidence to suggest that by banning Muslims or banning Muslims from a particular set of 6 countries that we would make ourselves here in the United States safer. And that's, I believe, one of the major reasons why the courts thus far have been very skeptical of the travel ban.
Again, he didn't say banning Muslims. He said banning states of origin. It's hard to understand how temporarily banning travel from 6 terror-plagued countries would not keep America safer, but the White House hitting back.
Susan Rice reminds everybody that no one on TV is under oath. She knows better that it's not a Muslim ban. And I would say that her comments yesterday are just really parallel to the lies she told after the Benghazi attack, which took the lives of 4 innocent Americans. She, when she lied there that it was about a video, she knows it's not a ban against a certain religion. She knows very clearly that these are 6 countries that were identified by her Obama administration departments.
All right, Aaron, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to get to the ban, the temporary travel ban in a second. But a poll found in April found that 2/3 of British Muslims would not tell the government if a friend or family member became involved with extremists. Also, half of them said homosexuality will be illegal, and over 20% supported establishing Sharia in the UK. So when Donald Trump says, let's find out who's coming here, what their purpose is, what their intent is, by extreme vetting, I don't have a problem with it. Do you?
No. You have to know who's coming into this country. Here's the thing. America's like a 14-year-old teenager going through security puberty right now. And until we figure out exactly how to do this thing, and this is a process, you have to slow down who's coming here. We're not banning Muslims. I hate when they spin that because it makes it sound like we're going after somebody because of a specific race. We're not. We're going after them for a specific reason, which is we're putting them into a certain type of box temporarily just so that we can filter them to make sure that they're coming here to not blow up women and children.
I agree with that, but how long is it going to take? Because it was supposed to be a 90-day ban. It's now been 129 days since the original one was supposed to take place. And we haven't heard anything about reviewing.
It's a 90-day window to start reevaluating.
So what's going on with the reevaluating?
Well,
haven't heard anything about
it. It's being held up.
Like, there's been nothing going on with the reevaluating. We haven't heard about the reevaluating whatsoever.
He needs the 90 days to start, the clock to start, so they can go ahead.
He can't reevaluate things while the people are on their way here.
Everything's blocked right now.
The White House, because they admittedly, this is not rocket science, they've had some problems with messaging. They lost this argument early on. This was a very simple issue.
Yes, it was.
It was very simple. The countries were identified by the previous administration. They're failed states. I've worked in places like this. There's no infrastructure. It's a nightmare. I've got a company that does due diligence, background vetting of people all around the globe, including places like Iraq. And you have to travel out to a village. There's no infrastructure. There's no databases. In these failed states, you have to travel out to a village to try to find somebody who knows the subject to say, who are they associated with? What's their past activities? What are they? That's the granularity that you'd have to get to do the background vetting on these people. It was a simple issue. We want to take a break, a suspension, and say let's look at the way that we do this. Let's figure out. Well, because the left hijacked, as they do, and they do it well, they hijack the argument. Suddenly it's a travel ban, it's a Muslim ban, and they conflate it, and they say, this is all about...
calls it a travel
ban.
Well, I know.
Trump
And that's what I say. There's a messaging issue from the White House.
So that's not from the left. That's from Donald Trump.
Well, but it's not a Muslim travel ban. It's a travel ban from countries of origin, really failed state countries, with a higher concentration of terrorist activity.
So what if I told you, Eric, as you know from my docket last week, I have no problem with that. I've got no problem with the countries identified. It's all a messaging problem from our president, because he went on the campaign trail and he talked about not letting Muslims into this country in totality.
So this Ninth Circuit and Fourth Circuit is holding this travel ban or the extreme vetting up because over a messaging problem with the White House. Meanwhile, the country might get attacked or be less safe. Over wording of the.
Because you know what, they're trying to read intention. That is what they're doing.
It's like a toddler holding this hostage, and this is a very important issue.
I'm just saying, it also wouldn't have protected any of the terrorist attacks that have taken place here since 1975.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Up next, the mainstream media's Trump derangement syndrome kicking into overdrive following the London attack. Be right back with it.
The mainstream media's knee-jerk loathing of President Trump on full display after the London terror attack. Following President Trump's renewed call for a travel ban, CNN host Reza Aslan tweeted out this very professional reaction, quote, "This bleep is not just an embarrassment to America and a strain on the presidency. He's an embarrassment to humankind." Whoa. Aslan has since apologized, and I'm not sure he wasn't crossing his fingers when he did it. But an even worse media display may have been made on MSNBC, with one anchor asking this about President Trump and his response to the London attack.
The president doesn't want us to be politically correct, right? So let's not be PC about this. Is the president trying to provoke a domestic terrorist attack with this Twitter rant, because only to prove himself right?
Wow, it's hard to know where to start with that. I certainly don't think that that's the case. He might have been referring a little bit to the reaction he had to the mayor, but
John Roberts is a nice guy, but he's an idiot for saying that. That is one of the most asinine things I've ever heard. The president of Thomas Roberts. The president of the United States wants to provoke a terror attack so he can be right. Provoke a terror attack in America so he can be right. That, along with CNN opinion host saying what he said. Richard Liu on NBC also said he wondered if the London police were being too aggressive with the terrorists. He wondered that out loud on air. I mean, I don't know. The mainstream media has lost their collective mind around the PC. Treat them nice. Be careful what you say. You're going to tick someone off, and it's going to get worse. The opposite has to happen. We got to get tougher with them. We got to kill them. We have to kill the ideology. I'm blown away that the mainstream media has just gone overboard in the wrong direction with this.
Well, we've been hearing about this for some time now, about how it's our behavior, it's our actions that fuel the terrorists, that cause them to do this. Look, I don't know if anybody remembers the Beirut barracks bombing. They didn't need, our endeavors in Iraq or Afghanistan to cause that. This has been going on for a long time, and it's going to continue to go on, unfortunately, for quite a long time. But I am very tired, because I've been hearing it all the time. I'm so tired of hearing it's our fault. It's not our fault that there is an element of Islam that wants to kill us.
And that's the problem, though, because the sympathist mentality stops us from developing the tone and the teeth that we need legally, which is, number one, to be able to go after the terrorists. So if this is a collective. If everybody doesn't come together and get on the same page, and let Trump do what he's got to do, and let the law enforcement agencies gather the intel, because I'll say it again, intel. Let me explain.
Yes.
Terrorists are no different than the mob. Giuliani disassembled the mob. It took him about 10 or 15 years. How did he do it? Warrants, intel, money, greasing, people inside. All of these guys are buyable. This is a dirty job. If it doesn't start immediately, everything that we're seeing in London is going to come here, which means that the security needs to reflect the amount of time it's going to take until the Americans can develop that multi-layered intel plan to be able to start putting these guys down. Security has to happen as well. So there's so much work ahead of us. The fact that there's even this kind of yapping from the other side of the media and putting handcuffs and restraints on the counterterror development is really disturbing.
Which also, I mean, and that's a very good point, because when you talk about how the mob gets taken down, I mean, it's a bit apples and oranges in the sense of, from an operational perspective, in the sense of sourcing and sources, and how do you develop sources? How do you recruit sources? Well, you get people inside the mob. Getting people inside these terrorist organizations, whether it's Al-Qaeda or Boko Haram or ISIS, whatever it may be, insanely difficult. Right? Insanely difficult.
Mike,
it can be
money.
done. It can
It's
be
all
done.
money. They want
Right.
the money.
Right. But you can do it. But it also causes a reliance, a greater reliance on technical collection, technical coverage, which then goes back to what we were talking about earlier about you got to expand the playing field. You got to widen those parameters so that we can do more and be more aggressive. But then you have, undoubtedly, you have the cries about privacy and civil liberties. I understand that. You need checks and balances.
That's really important. You
Yeah, of course.
absolutely,
No
absolutely
one's saying it's
important.
not. I want to go back to something you said in the earlier block, Mike, which is you've been in rooms where everybody's having this conversation that we're having at this table, and everybody almost agrees that we need to loosen those handcuffs, give law enforcement more latitude, and yet we never get there. Why?
Yeah, well, my feeling is because we're all like raccoons chasing the next shiny object, right? And so we tend to think, okay, oh my God, there's an attack and it's horrific, and we're focused on security. That pendulum goes over there, and we say, yeah, we're willing to give up things. And then, you know what, there's not an attack for a short period of time, and we get busy, and we're tired of taking our shoes off at TSA or whatever it may be, and we want life to go back to normal. And there's also just an element that just says, no, you can't do these things because there's a mistrust.
And that's what we have. We have the major cities where a lot of these terror attacks could be taking place, or probably plotting to be taking place. Mayor de Blasio, push back. There was a task force in New Jersey who said we have credible threats to New York City. But de Blasio pushed back because he felt the civil liberties were being violated because what they wanted to do, they wanted to tap the mosque. They wanted to listen in, and they had credible
You know what
threats.
the difference is?
And de Blasio being a liberal saying, no, we're not going to do that here. And when they had real stuff.
Yeah,
Wait till there's
because
more
people say,
terror.
well, once we
Wait
do
till there's
that,
more
we're no
terror.
different.
But how many of these things actually protect
Eric,
that? You talk about something like TSA, well, then they can just go outside the airport. You create soft zones around the highly secure zones when you do things like that.
Eric Bolling said a magic word: credible threats. And when you've got that, that's not indiscriminate eavesdropping. That is targeted.
You can't get credible intel unless you get the cuffs taken off.
And I agree. Totally agree.
All right, the vice chairman of the Senate Intel Committee says there's still no smoking gun at this point in the Russia probe. What could that indicate for James Comey's Senate testimony this week? We're coming right back.
You got my number, you can call on me. If you in trouble, put the fall on me. When you're mad, you can take it out on me. When it don't add up, you can count on me. When you're low, come get.
Well, welcome back to the Fox News Specialist. Our specialists today are Mike Baker and Aaron Cohen. So we're going to continue our conversation. Senator Mark Warner, the Democratic vice chair of the Senate Intel Committee, is casting some fresh doubt on whether there's any real hard evidence of the wrongdoing in the Russia probe.
There is a lot of smoke. We have no smoking gun at this point, but there is a lot of smoke. But clearly, it would be very, very troubling if the President of the United States is interfering in investigations that affect potentially the president and his closest associates.
Former FBI Director James Comey is set to face the Senate Intel Committee on Thursday, of course. And the White House is announcing today that President Trump will not invoke executive privilege to try to block his testimony. Okay, Eric, so we got from the senator there smoke, a hypothetical, and smoke.
Yeah, lots of smoke.
Is there any?
I can't remember who we had. We had someone over there a couple of days ago who said there's a heck of a lot of smoke. That doesn't necessarily mean there's fire, and there is no fire. I mean, did you have, if you caught the Megyn Kelly interview with Vladimir Putin last night, I mean, he basically said, you guys are making so much out of this, there's nothing there, and there is nothing there. If there's something there, then I understand, but you know what, this ended up being the best thing that could happen to Donald Trump. You got the special prosecutor, so all these people can say, you know what, I'm not talking to your panels here and the House and the Senate and the DOJ. What I'll do is I'll wait for the special prosecutor, and if there's something there, there's there. But my hunch is there's not going to be anything there.
I gotta say, Eric, though, if Vladimir Putin, whatever he says about it, makes absolutely no difference in terms of what I ultimately think about it, which is, as you know, I'm still waiting to see what happens. But Vladimir Putin, I wouldn't really get like a letter of recommendation from that guy.
He did say something very important, though. The one nugget during that interview, I didn't think there was a lot of breaking news out of it, but there was one nugget where he said, by the way, the United States does this to every other country. He goes, put a finger on a map, and almost every country you can touch, the United States will be trying to hack into or influence certain elections. It's global. These guys will tell you it happens going both ways
Still
by
don't want
everyone.
it happening to us.
As far as I know, the U.S. has never done that. But look, I wouldn't trust Putin as far as I can throw him. But I also believe there's nothing there. And this is another one of those stories that has just spun out of control. And frankly, if it's not the Russia story, it's going to be something else. It doesn't matter. As long as the left has something that they can throw at this administration, it's going to be a problem. But with Russia, did Russia meddle in our elections? Well, yeah, they've been meddling in elections since the early 1940s when they were trying to keep us out of World War II because they were still at that time allied with the Nazis. This is what they do. They fight proxy wars. They do all sorts of things. They're very, very good at it. Does that mean there's collusion? No. Do I honestly believe it? And you know what? You can't swing a dead cat in Washington, D.C. without hitting somebody who had business dealings with a Russian or somebody from the former Soviet Union. So I'm not buying
this is going to be great television. We've heard nothing from him since this memo came out. He didn't say anything. Now he's going to be speaking on the record in the hearing.
Let me go to you, Aaron, on this. Were you surprised that President Trump did not invoke his executive privilege here and is having?
No, I think he's doing what he has to do. I think President Trump is focusing on his job. He's got a lot on his plate right now, and I don't really think he needs to be thinking about what Vladimir Putin is saying on television right now. I don't even think he ever met the guy. Yeah. So I don't, again, and Mike nailed it, and everybody here gets it. You know, this is just another cog in the wheel to try and do whatever we can to keep the president from being able to do his job. Right now, London is under siege. President Trump needs to focus on being able to execute security protocols. And he's having a hard time with that. So there's so many things working against this guy. I'm surprised he isn't absolutely losing his mind at this point. He's got a lot on his plate. And you need to leave him alone and let him do his job because there's thousands of potential would-be lone wolves or known wolves or whatever you want to call them. That's millions of hours of eyeballs. And you can vet this, Mike. You know, coming from that agency world, it's one person takes a lot of people to watch. In Israel, we're a lot smaller. We don't have the luxury of being able to put a lot of people, so we have to be really savvy and sneaky about how we do this and really dedicate our resources. We don't have the luxury. Yeah. There are so many eyeballs to put down in front of these potential would-be lone wolves. And again, I don't care whether they're associated with ISIS ideologically off the internet where they were motivated or whether or not they're connected to a much larger group. The fact is that any one of these guys can grab a knife, grab a van, ram into a bunch of people, and Donald Trump is very busy.
I'd like to hear more about how they're going to do things with that, because all we hear is ban, 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 ban. We really see so many problems with people who became radicalized when they moved here, homegrown terrorists.
And by the way, I just have to get this in because I found this to be probably the funniest comment of the past week. If you want to know how disingenuous Putin is and the nature of this guy, a former old school KGB officer, he actually had the gall to say when he sat next to General Flynn at that dinner that was held in Moscow, he had no idea who Mike Flynn was. It didn't occur to him. He had no idea. He found out afterwards that he had something to do with intel. The idea that the press is paying attention to what Putin says is absurd. You know, they're going to act in their own best interest. That's what Russia does. And Putin has always regretted the fall of the Soviet Union, the collapse of that wall. He believes that's the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century. So we have to understand that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean there's collusion between the Trump administration. That is just smoke that's going nowhere.
Yeah. Well said. So a quick programming note. So you don't want to miss this show, particularly on Thursday, the day of the Comey hearing. Former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski will be one of our specialists for the entire hour. Be sure to catch it. And coming up, Portland, Oregon police seizing dozens of weapons as a face-off between the far left and pro-Trump demonstrators turned violent yesterday. Is this a disturbing omen for protests to come? Stay tuned.
Every weekend, you were my best friends. You had my attention, it was all on you. Every feeling I used to feel when my hands were full, cause they were all on you. So when it's late and you're laying.
Far-left protesters confronting a pro-Trump free speech rally in Portland, Oregon yesterday, and things took a turn for the worst.
Tensions were rising in Chapman Square as a pro-Trump rally wrapped up across the street at Terry Trunk Plaza. Police say protesters started throwing bricks and bottles at them. As protesters held their ground, you can hear police deploying pepper balls. Then they deployed flashbangs. For several minutes, Chapman Square sounded like a war zone. Several arrests were made here, including this woman who had an altercation with a Trump supporter.
There have been 14 confirmed arrests, but the more disturbing development is the dozens of weapons seized by the police. Local reports say everything ranging from axes to hammers to knives were found, a number from the area occupied by anti-Trump protesters. I think the larger point here is that this really symbolizes what's going on in our country right now. If you're on one side, the people on the other side, you don't really see them as people at all, just the idea that you have to defeat.
Right. I don't know. I don't understand how they got the name anti-fascists. I mean, they're fascists.
Hilarious,
yeah,
right?
I mean, it doesn't make any sense. That's what you do if you're a fascist.
Yeah,
you go
trying to
and you
shut down
stop free speech, oftentimes, in hooded garb and carrying weapons.
Yeah, I don't know how they
say hooded garb.
Irony is dead in 2017 in general.
Yeah.
Irony is dead.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You lose the name protester when you start, quote, throwing bricks and bottles and flash explosives.
Absolutely. That's called a criminal.
To rioter, right?
Yeah, or criminal.
And should be incarcerated. But, it's got to be scary if you're a pro-Trump rally and there are people with knives and whatever else, shanks they got there. That's scary.
Yeah. Now, what I thought was interesting about this is the mayor was concerned about having this rally here because of the free speech people. And as it turns out, these weapons where they were found was the area where was the people protesting the protesters.
Yeah, what I would do is I would instruct law enforcement to dress up as Antifa and begin to infiltrate those crowds quietly and start arresting them and just sort of like we like to call just appear out of nowhere. I think there just needs to be a little hair of fear infused into those crowds. And that's what I would do. I would get in there undercover, plain clothed, and I would start looking for the troublemakers, because you can see those weapons starting to kind of present themselves and print a little bit if they're carrying a wrench or a knife. I mean, these are serious weapons. People can get hurt here. It's not a joke. You know what I mean? So once it escalates or that level of potential threat escalates, I think it's time for law enforcement to start thinking about plainclothes guys, dispersing them into those crowds. That's how I would do it. And then, just start grabbing these guys and arresting them right there on the spot, and they'll just start dispersing.
This is what some of these people do as like a job. They're at every one of these things.
That's the point. And they're being paid, and these are organized. I mean, MoveOn.org has organized a bunch of them. They're various organizers of these anti-Trump or anti-free speech protesters. What they should do is turn around and find the organizers of the arrest those people, but then turn around and all the expenses that it takes to clean up, to incarcerate them, turn around and make MoveOn.org.
And then after they arrest them, they should read them the definition of fascism from the dictionary on the way, just so they know.
Well, Eric makes a very good point here, which is that a lot of times, and we see this all the time, is that, something that appears to be a grassroots movement or community-based or just locals rising up against, a free speech rally, whatever it may be. There is a national element to it. There's a coordination level where they provide guidance and training. They provide finances and communications or legal support. And so you're right. Hey, where's a good, intrepid investigative journalist? Go after that. Find out who's at the bottom of some of these protests that are supposedly just forming out of the goodness of the local Antifa. Is it Antifa?
Antifa.
Go ahead,
I'll say this. I take a lot of issues with certain things from President Trump, but it's really important that he and his supporters be able to say their piece, to come together and to have that moment of speech and what they feel like is important. And it's actually a circular issue, because by shutting that down, it really breeds us becoming a nation that so many people say that they are afraid of us becoming, that they don't want us to become. So if we're going to be truly tolerant, if we're going to be a nation of values that embrace ideologies that are diverse than our own, we should not only tolerate, we have to embrace and celebrate all of these ways.
And put a bunch of undercover officers in there.
Yeah.
Put a bunch of undercover cops in there as well.
Yeah, well, I agree. Lock them up. I certainly think Eric's right. When you start bringing weapons, you're no longer a protester. You're a criminal.
Absolutely agree.
Someone can get killed. It's not a joke.
Yeah.
All right, well, when we return, we're going to circle back with our specialists, Mike Baker and Aaron Cohen. Don't go away.
All right, time to circle back with our specialists, Mike Baker and Aaron Cohen. I'm going to forego my time and just say thank you to two great, let's call you bad as heck dudes. On a very special terror-related day. Good having both of you.
Thanks
I'll turn it over to Eboni.
No, that's really real. And you know what? Moments like this, I mean, I've been on set with Mike several times, awesome being on set with you today, Aaron. Learned so much. So absolutely thank you for that.
Thank you.
So I know you've got ideas. You've got a company that does this type of stuff. If there's one thing that every American that's at home right now watching that wants to make this less of an issue for us as a country and as a world, what would you have them do? What can we all do?
Do we have, 4 more hours left in the show? You know what? I've been watching this a long time and dealing with it a long time. I'm cynical. I don't think it's going to go away in our lifetimes. But, you got to get busy living, so you don't change your lifestyle. You don't change your pattern. That's not going to happen. You got to stay out there. But I think if there's one thing, we need to find a way to actually begin to talk to each other again. Right? We can't, this is, Aaron said it earlier, this is not a joke. This is national security issues. We have to be able to converse. Both sides come together if we're going to get an agreement to improve the future for our kids and try to find some way to minimize this as close to zero as possible as a risk in the future.
Yeah.
Kat?
I wanted to circle back, if you will, to something we talked about earlier, where I think everyone misunderstood when I was talking about why haven't they been reviewing. I was not talking about the refugees. I was talking about the procedures themselves. So there would be nothing to stop, would both of you agree, them from reviewing the procedures in the meantime. Why hasn't that been happening? Or if it has, have they not been talking about it? Do either of you have any thoughts on that at all?
It's just being held up. It's just political Joe gooping up the wheel. That's all it is.
Yeah, as far as I know, there's nothing that's stopping them from doing a review of the process.
Right, that's what I was talking about.
I suspect they probably are doing that. But the idea was do a temporary suspension while you do the review.
Right. We got to go. And that's what the courts are holding up right now. Thank you to our Fox News specialist today, Mike Baker, Aaron Cohen. We thank you all for watching. Make sure to follow us on social media, Specialist FNC on Twitter and Facebook. 5 o'clock will never be the same. And guess what? Special report coming up right 3, 2,